Hi, my name is Greg from Warp Tree, and I just wanted to share with you our new pencil and paper character sheet for the Surge TTRPG system. I'm not going to go through everything here. There's a couple things I just wanted to point out to you. If you, at the time of recording this, our rewrite of the core rulebook has not come out yet, and so I just want to talk about a couple of the new features that we have that you may not be aware of, and kind of talk about what those are. So I'm not going to go over every single field here, just because a lot of it is already covered. But let's go ahead and look at real quick underneath the Surge logo. You can see the HP field here and something called recovery. It's a little tiny black box in there. And so this is covered in our rulebook, but if you're not familiar with our system, every time you either take a hit or you take an hour of rest, you will on the following turn add your recovery points to your current HP. In combat, the practice for that is, think of it like getting smacked around and an adrenaline boost, and then we don't have long rests or short rests. It's every hour of rest that you take, whether that's sleeping or sitting on the side of the road just catching your breath, you get to add that recovery point value back to your current HP. Next to it is a box called Encounter, and so we used to have something called Sequence Counter, but that really got confusing because that is a term and jargon that's not typically associated with TTRPGs. When people talk about combat or some sort of event like a trap or even a puzzle, usually those will be called encounters. And so we had a lot of confusion originally in our community about what a sequence counter was. So we have lovingly rebranded that to be Encounter. And so every time that your GM basically gives you an award point in your encounter field, you are effectively adding your original HP plus your encounter score for what your maximum HP is. Your HP is not tied to your character level. You should be constantly progressing. It lives by sort of the statute of whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so that is what that encounter field is. It is what used to be sequence counter. It didn't make sense to call it encounter counter, so we just did a fun hyphenation of encounter, and it's N-counter. Okay, moving right along to Menace. Menace is a new feature in our system in which how imposing you are will definitely determine how your interactions with others will go, as well as it will also probably play into how stealthy you will be. And so the more weapons, the heavier the gear and armor that you carry, or if you are a Moment in particular, because that is at the time of recording the only species that has a default menace counter, which I believe is 2. You will add all these scores up, and that will be your menace counter score. But it will move left and right on that register there as you're donning and doffing equipment. And the reason that we did this is because there are situations in which you will not be able to wear your armor, or you shouldn't wear your armor, right? If you're going to a ball, for instance, and you're trying to get cozy with some maybe local government officials in the city that you're in, you're not going to want to carry all that stuff on you because it's going to make you more imposing. It's going to make you menacing. So if you're trying to persuade someone or you're trying to get in someone's good graces, then ultimately you want your menace low. Because the GM will say, go ahead and roll your charisma, and then if you're trying to persuade someone to do something for you, you will probably have that score subtracted from your roll. So if you're a level 1 in your charisma attribute, and then you have a 4 menace counter, you might as well not roll, because the max score you could probably make is a 4 unless you surge, and then -4. So it can really work against you. Now, let's reverse things a little bit and talk about intimidation. If you're trying to intimidate someone, the more imposing you are, the better. So the GM might say, hey, go ahead and add your menace roll to your menace score to your charisma roll. And then also when it comes to guile, and I have to get the guile probably first because it ties into that guile, is everything that is rogue-like activities. So your stealthing, sleight of hand, deception are all captured in one statistic, and that is guile. It's under the skill list there. And so if you're trying to be stealthy, if you're clunking around with a bunch of armor and stuff, you're very menacing, you're large, you're imposing, it's going to be harder to stealth. So you will probably have your roll deducted from based on your menace score in that fashion as well. So speaking of Guile, I kind of explained what it is. Why did we add an 11th skill? Originally, we had a nice rounded 5 attributes and 10 skills. Well, we tried to oversimplify our game a little bit. We originally had everything that's in Guile as a charisma roll. And I know if you're not familiar with our system and our justifications for such, you're probably wondering why. I will answer that. Think about an environment where you're trying to stealth around, and let's say you fail a roll. You are failing a roll, and there are consequences to that. And so the thought process was, if you were trying to stealth around and you failed a roll, you'd be very mindful and be aware of how others are perceiving that environment. And so it became, how do others perceive an environment? How do people work? And so that's kind of why originally we thought charisma could kind of work for our stealth stuff, but it added so much consternation and confusion. We were like, okay, we really have to separate this, because just because you can, be a swashbuckling, handsome, personable character does not mean that you're good at stealthing around. So we did have to delineate those two for obvious reasons. It was not the best choice. It was my choice. And I had to concede that that wasn't the best way to go. So we did separate those out. So yes, now all of those activities have its own statistic, which is Guile. Those are really the new elements from the Beta Core rulebook that you won't find there, that are captured here on this character sheet. We try to keep this as simple as possible. If you're wondering why you have so many few fields in the weapons and armor tables, because our encumbrance system is not weight-based. It's a combination. Each item and weapon and piece of armor is assigned an encumbrance value, which is based on the size and weight. And so we automatically assign those values. You will not be able to carry copious amounts of things. You can't just gobble up all the loot, right? You're going to have to be selective. And so that's why there's only so many rows, because if you fill out the table, you'll probably be over your maximum encumbrance. Speaking of, right above those two tables on the right hand side there in the skills and more section, you have encumbrance, you have your movement speed, which is based on your species that you've chosen to play, and then a number of actions, which you can look in the book, and is a result of an equation based on your dexterity rating. I think that pretty much covers it all. I did want to take a quick second. Yeah, I got a couple minutes. I want to take a quick second to just talk about some of the other skills, because there were some questions. This is covered in our rewrite more, but the beta left some to be desired in some of these explanations. Clerical is not about going around and being a do-gooder and helping the poor and feeding the hungry and healing the sick. Clerical, think of it as office work. If you're doing something, maybe you're working in a business, you're doing accounting, writing, ledger type stuff, clerical is the skill you might use for this. Culture is sort of a performance-based, as well as awareness of regional demographics and regional cadences and ceremonies that would occur as you're traveling through different areas as a player, and your character and what they know. But it's also like, let's say you want to break out in a song and dance, you have a musical instrument, or you want to sing, you would also use culture for this role as well. Guile I've already covered. The craftsmanship, leathercraft, metallurgy, and woodcraft is just crafting in those respective medium industries. And then marksmanship, I think, is pretty well covered, but just in case, our ranged attacks for physical weapons like bows, muskets, anything of that nature is not tied to dexterity. Where strength is our statistic for attacking and defending, for melee attacks and against melee attacks. Dexterity is not used for our ranged attacks, and nor is strength. Marksmanship is, because it's a skill that you can work aside from your character leveling. Our character levels, where you put points and attributes and building your skills, are somewhat separate, so that you can build your skills more effectively. Mechanical. There were some questions about mechanical. Mechanical can be used in a number of ways. Specifically, like you might use mechanical if you're trying to pick a lock with a lockpick, right? You're trying to listen for all the different what the heck are they called? The little bumper things in the lock itself, stuff like that. I recently saw a GM. I thought this was a great way to use it. He had a player who was driving an automobile for the first time roll mechanical to see how well he could drive, and then when he failed that roll, all of his passengers got motion sickness. I thought that was a fantastic way to do it. Yeah, you can use mechanical in a number of ways. Basically anything equipment-based, technology-based, tinkering, those kind of things are going to fit into that paradigm. And then survival is pretty well covered, but survival is more than just foraging. It's also the statistic used for death rows. So death rows are covered with survival. Go ahead and check that out in the book. Pay special attention to that. And then there was a couple of questions about luck, how to use luck. It's kind of a blank stat. If you're, as a GM, if your players are struggling with something, and I know that sometimes you really want to see your players succeed or give them a chance to, because if they don't, something bad's going to happen. And so there can be sort of a stagnation over a period of like 30 minutes where you're like, okay, maybe try this. And they're just not making it. And it gets frustrating on both sides of the table. And so luck kind of can pull that back, right? And say, hey, you've tried a few different things. You've probably been there for like 10 minutes trying to do all these different things. Try roll luck. Let's see if like maybe someone, like if you're trying to unlock a door, maybe someone just opens it from the other side. Something that would help the players out. And if they fail that, then okay, the bad thing now has to occur. Like it gives you that finality, and it's like, okay, you don't have to feel so bad as a GM because you did everything you could. You had that stat that you tried, and you gave them a chance. I mean, that's what luck is, right? It's chance. You can also use it for gambling and games and other things like that, but lots of ways to use luck. So I'm over time. This was supposed to be 10 minutes or less, but I wanted to just cover some of these elements of the game, answer some questions, as well as talk about what's here in the presented character sheet in front of you. Thanks so much for your time. If you have questions, join us on Discord. You can find all of our social media links at our site at warpedtree.com. Again, my name is Greg, and you can also reach Goose and DG. And we're all available for you to talk at and ask your questions, and hopefully make the game make more sense for you. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you at the table soon. Take care.